we're going to actually now delve into the painting itself as close observers. And I want to show you some of the things that I found out. This painting I saw 20 years ago. It's 10 feet wide, 6 feet tall, and it used to hang in the Amundsen building at LACMA. Fortunately, it's visible on the internet, so you can see it anytime you like. There are 21 individual portraits in this picture, and including the baby. And when I saw it, the museum card next to it said, and this is kind of what got me hooked, painted by Julius LeBlanc Stewart, 1892, rumored to depict a branch of the Vanderbilt family, but no one knows for sure. The painting has an inscription on the back, which the artist took pains to remove. So, since I had curiosity, you'll get it. And I was a close observer. Besides reading the museum card, I thought, what's in the inscription? Isn't that okay? I checked into it, talked to the assistant curator at the museum. We've never seen the inscription. What? What? Well, gang, here it is. Now, all that took was tracing who was it who sold the painting to the museum. Mm-hmm. It was Herschel and Adler in 1980. And I called Herschel and Adler and I said, there's an inscription? Oh yeah, we've got an infrared scan of it. Should we email it to you? There it is. And it says Sunday, 11 a.m., which is pretty easy to read. And then it's got a bunch of stuff scratched out. This bottom part could say Vanderbilts. There's some other stuff there too. The museum the museum actually had this scan. They had it in their provenance file. They had this same image. But when I talked to the senior conservator at LACMA, who's the scientific guy who does X-rays and stuff like that, he said, well, actually, we've never seen it because it's underneath a vapor barrier, and it's a 10-foot wide painting, and we'd have to peel it back, and it would be hard to schlep the thing around, and it's not worth the expense. We know what it says. No, you don't. It's been scratched out. So, not curious? Well, the first question I have to ask, well, actually the second, what did it say? Second question is, who wrote that? Well, they said the artist, but how do they know? Sunday, 11 a.m. could be from the shipper. That's the date that it's going to be picked up. Okay, this did go, the first place it was exhibited was the Chicago World's Fair, 1892. So maybe that was just when they were going to pick it up. Well, go to the Smithsonian. Here's something in Julius LeBlanc Stewart, the painter's own handwriting. Sunday. The DAY especially is a total match. Did the museum ever do that? No, I did that in about a week. The scholars in the museum believed at the time that the work was not a commission, and it had stayed in the painter's estate. It had stayed painter's estate until 1952. Because it wasn't a commission, they assumed that the Vanderbilts had nothing to do with it. Although the oral history that surrounded it, the painter's family, kept saying, oh yeah, Vanderbilts. They assumed that the event was in the painter's own family, and his closest relative was his sister, who had a baby in 1891, so that seemed kind of close, except the location was in Tunis in North Africa. His sister, Ellen Stewart, she married a Dutchman, Broman, Auguste Rollman, and he was an import-export guy. They had a chateau in France. They also had a summer home in Tunis, which is where they would have been at the time of the birth. And that the subjects in the painting were probably members of his family, studio models, or generic. And they, again, these very authoritative scholars believed that the Vanderbilt oral history was bogus. As close observers, we'll test that hypothesis. One critic dismissed the painting so thoroughly that he said the only reason LACMA bought it was there were no good impressionists left to buy. So the next place I went was, okay, could I fit the people in the painting to, using genealogy, could I fit it to the Vanderbilt family tree? Well, there's two brothers here, William and Cornelius. William had 3 children, the youngest of which was Harold, which is 1884. That was quite a bit before the painting. But here, Cornelius had Gladyss, his youngest child, 1886. That's still 6 years before the painting. But if we're going to test the Vanderbilt hypothesis, this is the only branch of the family that's going to work. So that's part of our testable hypothesis. So I found this in Lewis Okenclose, who also happens to be a Vanderbilt family descendant. A lot of them wrote about it. So I decided to dissect this painting, and I'm going to start trying to identify the people in it. Okay, using the Vanderbilt genealogy family tree, I had access to books and pictures and likenesses. So now, it turns out there were actually 7 children. It took me a little bit of research to find that out. There was the oldest daughter, Alice, named after her mother, who died at age 5. So she couldn't possibly be in the painting. But also, where the family lived would have been important. Obviously would have been important in the way that the painting looked, because in 1886, when Gladyss was born, she was born in August. The Vanderbilt family always summered in Newport, Rhode Island. They had 2 houses, 2 main houses. They had one on Fifth Avenue in New York during the winter, but during the summer they would be at a place they called the Breakers, which is on Ochre Point. Here's Ochre Point, named because of the yellow color of the cliffs there. And Cornelius Vanderbilt had bought this house from Pierre Lorillard, the tobacco magnate. And it is not the house that stands there today. The Breakers, a big stone structure. It was actually a very grand, ornate wooden structure. And we'll see some of that in a minute. But this would be the location. So hold that in your mind. It didn't take much research to figure out that's where it would have been, because that's where she would have been born. That is, in fact, where she was born. So this is just a quick recap of chronology. That I found out her birth date. I was able to surmise, since the baptisms occur typically about a month after birth, and it has to be on a Sunday, it would have been September the 26th. There's some other reasons for thinking that. Then this is all had to do with the way the book was plotted, but the Paris Universal Exposition, where Julius LeBlanc Stewart was first hoping to win a prize, not for this painting, but for his other paintings, was in 1889. Then the oldest Vanderbilt boy died in 1892 at age 18. No matter how rich you were, typhoid fever, he was gone. May 1892, the painting was completed. October, it was sent to the Chicago World's Fair, which is where it was shown first. And then the wooden structure that was the Breakers burned to the ground, along with all the evidence that we might have found in it, which is another reason why the research was tough and why the art historians got thrown off the track. 1899, which features in my stories, poor Cornelius Vanderbilt, richest man in the world, died of a stroke because he was so upset with his son. He had an argument with his son, fell over dead. 1952, the painting was never sold. The painter's heirs sold it to an art dealer, and it took all the way to 1980 for the art dealer to sell it to a museum. Then last year, the museum put it in storage. 2023, you might see it again, because that's when the new museum opens. Okay, so let's look through these likenesses here. Gertrude Vanderbilt, age 11. She would have been age 11. Here she is at age 6. age 5, sorry. Not a bad correspondence. Did anybody bother to make this connection? No. But one of the things that's really interesting about this is not only is this a portrait of Gertrude Gertrude when she was in Paris, when she was visiting Paris with her mother, the portrait is by Julius LeBlanc Stewart's best friend, teacher, and roommate, Raymondo Madrazo. He studied with him for years. They had adjoining studios. And so here are the Vanderbilts coming into the same building that Julius LeBlanc Stewart had a studio in. So we've got circumstantial evidence, right? We no proof, but interesting, okay? And there's a whole lot more of that. These two guys, Alfred and Reggie, are kind of generic likenesses, almost like the painter didn't know what they looked like. There aren't any good pictures of them as boys. There are plenty of pictures of them as older, but Reggie, by the way, the young one, who's related to him? He's Anderson Cooper's grandfather. Reggie's daughter is Gloria Vanderbilt, Jean's. And Gloria's Anderson's mother, and she married a guy named Cooper Union, I think, actually. Okay, the two other children, that accounts for 3 of them plus the baby, that's 4. The 2 other, which makes 6, are the 2 oldest boys. That might seem to be a gap. That might seem to be, well, where are the boys? Well, guess what? If this baptism was in late September, it didn't take long for the Preservation Society of Newport curator to say, oh, that's easy. They went to private school. They would have been at St. Paul's by then. So Bill and Neely were both out of the picture because they were away at school. You don't bring them home from school for the ceremony. The other thing to look into, that again seemed very obvious to me, was religion and liturgy, the actual mechanics of the ceremony. What religion is this? It looked like Catholic. What did I know? Well, the Vanderbilts were Episcopal, American Episcopal. And as it turns out, that's exactly what this is. The priest's robes, and after a considerable amount of research, and believe me, I got to know a lot of Episcopal priests by email up in New England, but it turns out they're all kind of closet genealogists, and they love art history, and they love challenges, and these guys talk to me all day long. It turns out that these robes are accurate for a parish priest. By Episcopal doctrine, a baptism is supposed to be performed by a visiting bishop. The bishop shows up once a month at the local church and baptizes everybody who's been born that month and goes on to the next church. Okay? So that was kind of weird, because here are the Vanderbilts, about as important Episcopals as you could find in New York City, and a not lowly, but I mean, somebody who's not at the top of the hierarchy is baptizing their dearest child here. The other thing that's interesting is, do you think those 2 people with the baby are the parents based on the painting? No. Those are the sponsors. Those are godfather and godmother. There's a third sponsor, a woman. It turns out that in the Episcopal doctrine of the time, I don't know whether it's still true, you needed 2 sponsors the same sex as the baby. Okay? So that makes the baby a girl. That totally rules out the William Vanderbilt family, because their youngest kid was a boy. Now, Julius Stewart's family, the one that they think is in the painting, the child that was born in 1891 was a girl. Except I corresponded with Julius Stewart's heirs, and it turns out the Bromans were French Huguenots. No possible liturgical similarity to Episcopals. Okay? They were basically French Huguenots and American Presbyterians, kind of the same, but not quite. But, not this. The chalice there holds the water. a chalice that can't be found, by the way, but the building burned down, right? So, in the Book of the Common Prayer, which will become important later, the liturgy, they're all looking at the Book of Common Prayer. Here's the Bishop of New York at the time, who knew Cornelius Vanderbilt very well. This is Henry Codman Potter. Those are a bishop's robes. Now you notice the similarity to the priest, but there's also the differences. Fuller sleeves, and the main thing, this bigger stole, okay? The bishop had a big stole. But the other thing that was striking to me is the guy in the painting looks nothing like Henry Codman Potter, okay? So keep that in mind, because it's a mystery for now. We'll stay curious about it. As to likenesses, again, here are the possibilities. We could have the Vanderbilt family if I can prove that I can find some in there. I already found Gertrude. The painter's family, there might be some in there because he painted it 6 years after the fact. He had some studio models. And then studio models that he had hired, and generic likenesses if he just didn't have anybody, maybe, you know, for extras, you know, what in movies we would call extras. This is actually a picture of Julius Stewart's sister, Ellen Broman, who married the Dutchman, Augustus Rollman. This was taken like 1903, I think. So, you know, they're all older than they would have looked in the painting, but keep that in mind because that'll become important. As I talked to the Preservation Society of Newport, I said, well, what about these godparents? Who might they be? He said, oh, easy. The Twombleys, this was Cornelius Vanderbilt's sister, had the lot next door in Newport. His sister, godparents, lived next door. Sounds good to me. So, photographs, here's Florence Twombly. Now, one of the things about Julius Stewart is he always painted women looking prettier than they were. But in terms of how she would have looked back then, dark hair, about the same height, I thought that was a match. Worked for me. Her husband, Hamilton, and I don't know if the artist Trombley is related to them, but it wouldn't surprise me. Hamilton Twombly, this shows him a lot later, okay? Some of us are losing our hair, and he did. Could be a match, but one of the things that's striking, especially about this particular period of history, is the men who wore facial hair usually stuck with it. It wasn't like today, like, oh, today I have a beard, I'll try it, you know, I'll try a mustache tomorrow. You know. But, you know, how long have you had yours? Your whole life, or pretty much? You weren't born, well, you're, okay, well, Hamilton wasn't either, but he's shown clean shaven, and that'll be important for some of the other people. This is interesting. These are Alice Vanderbilt, the mother of the baby in question here. Those are her two sisters, unmarried sisters, who are referred to in society as the Sisters Gwen. Seti was the older of the two. Edith was the younger, and it would be logical if there were going to be a third sponsor that it would be the wife's oldest sister. One of the things, the painter's also giving us one more clue. What might it be? What do you notice that's similar about those two girls? Red hair. So here we have a visual clue. They're sisters. Well, there's the mother. She's kind of a redhead, but she's awfully pretty. She's not Alice Vanderbilt. She probably is pretty much of a ringer for the painter's sister. So that looked like a dead end. But the Newport newspapers, again found through the Rhode Island Historical Society, the Newport newspapers indicate that the Sisters Gwen were visiting the Breakers the weekend of September the 26th. There were house guests. That was a notable event. We can put them in that room on that date. So more circumstantial evidence, right? The grandmother, she's my favorite, okay? The theory that this might be the painter's mother, that's the painter's mother, Helen Morgan Stewart. Red-faced, ruddy complexion, dyspeptic disposition. But, what else can we notice about her? Real obvious.
The hair color.
Well, hair color is different, yeah, but you know, this might not be when she was older. What else? Really obvious, more obvious than that. Black dress, who said it? Absolutely. Well, this woman, who is Cornelius Vanderbilt's mother, her husband had died exactly a year before. Now, as Helen Stewart reminds us, a lot of women at the time of a certain age, especially dowagers, wore black because Queen Victoria did. After Albert died, she dressed only in black, and all her jewelry was black. Okay, so that's really not a clue, but it also fits. But look at the likeness. This is the portrait of her maybe 20 years previous by Porter that hangs at the Biltmore mansion. Don't you think those two women look alike? Absolutely. Yeah. No. This is and those are about the same time. She was younger then. We don't really have any pictures of her, you know, when she's white-haired. But I thought that was a match. As to the father in the painting, okay, you know, here's the mustache question. Cornelius Vanderbilt never wore a mustache, and he had sideburns that he never shaved. He never, you know, had worn differently. And the same age, the same coloring, but not quite a match. And here is a sketch that the painter did of his brother-in-law, Augustus Rollman. And you notice sideburns here, mustache, and you know, maybe that's a match, maybe it's not. But we could figure at least maybe Broman was the studio model. Also very interesting, since Cornelius Vanderbilt's father was dead and had been for some years, his father figure was his business partner, Chauncey Depew. Depew was an attorney. He was the main attorney of the New York Central Railroad, but he was also the family's attorney. He was also an advisor. He was also the wise old man. He was the one who was always around to sort out, you know, whatever mess, you know, they got into. Also, the Newport papers put Chauncey Depew at the house the exact same weekend. They reported Chauncey Depew is visiting Cornelius Vanderbilt, weekend of September the 26th. Same time, he must have been in the house the same time that the sisters Gwen were. So great. Except there's a little bit of a problem here. The age of the guy in the painting is the age that Depew would have looked in the 1890s. Not the way he would have looked as in the top picture, or closer to the top picture, at the time that the girl was born. Okay. This guy looks a little bit more like him. Another Dutchman. This is probably Wilfred Broman, Augustus' father. So, Julius Stewart's brother-in-law's father. So, grandfather character. And where do we see him? Posing in one of Julius Stewart's other paintings called 5 O'Clock Tea. So probably a guy who had some time on his hands and what is your model for Julius? He needs people in his studio. So that's probably who this is, although historically we think it's got to be him. Alice Vanderbilt. Now this is where the story gets really weird. Alice Vanderbilt, real photograph, about 4'6". Not particularly pretty. The portrait up above is by a painter who is trying to make her look prettier than she was, okay? Extreme church lady. Cornelius met her at Sunday school. Cornelius was the whitest man in America. He thought, he valued being an Episcopal deacon above. He refused to go to his father's deathbed because he was in a meeting of the Foreign Missions Committee at church. That will figure into the story somewhat later. But there's the painter's sister. And look at those two paintings he did of her. Okay? Look at the one on the right, which is undoubtedly his sister. What can you tell me about that painting and the one on the left?
Even the dress looks
The dress is the same.
yeah.
The dress is the same. It's like he had to hang it in the studio. It's like, put on the dress. If you're my studio model today, put on the dress. Okay, it's a peignoir, you know. Okay, so the question is, which is going to be unanswered for now, is why did Stewart disguise some of the principal players? Because the numbers, the liturgy, the facts, the appearance of the room, a lot of the other clues that we'll find really tie up with the Vanderbilts. But the main characters, the people who were kind of at the center of the story, don't match up. That's really weird. Okay, this is my favorite. This is my favorite. This guy, the priest, we already said he's a parish priest, which means he could be the rector of the church, meaning he's the regular, pastor, as it will. And here are two pictures of Henry Codman Potter. Not a match. Not a match. I think you'll all agree. Not the same guy. The parish priest of Cornelius Vanderbilt's church in New York City. This took a lot of digging. Actually, might have taken a year. Samuel Cooke.
Oh my God.
Now look at that. The eyes, the nose, the cleft, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow, what a match. Hit it out of the park. Guess what? There's a big problem with this. This guy would have been about 75 on the day of the baptism. This is a very old engraving. So, what are we to make of this? Well, what I think we make of this is, yes, that's Sam Cooke. If the bishop couldn't make it, and it turns out, by my research, I found out that Henry Codman Potter was sick that day. He was visiting Newport. His brother was there, but he was ailing with the flu at his brother's house. I found that out from the historian of the Episcopal Diocese of New York. Had to chase that guy for a while. But it turns out Codman Potter had a diary. He recorded what he did every Sunday for years. So he didn't do the baptism. But who would have done it instead? Cornelius would have picked up the phone, and yes, he had a phone, and told this guy to jump on the train and come out and baptize my daughter. Because it couldn't be a priest from a visiting church. That wouldn't be kosher at the time. But the testable hypothesis I have from this is the painter knew that it was Cooke. The painter didn't paint him live. The painter didn't know what age he was. And maybe all he had was this as source material. And there's some other indications too. Because see, all these art historians want the painter to be in the room. Well, I'm sorry. There's all kinds of examples where the painters were never in the room, and I'll give you one later. This guy with the beard. Everybody pretty much agrees Julius Stewart put himself in the painting. Not the greatest likeness, but that's how Stewart looked. I don't know whether he actually painted in a three-piece suit. I kind of think not. I think he just got dressed up when the photographer was coming. This guy, though, this drove me crazy. Who is this guy? This is not a studio model. This is not just a generic likeness. This is a guy who's so weird looking, if you saw him on the street 20 years later, you'd know him, right? He's distinctive. Well, I figured he's got to be the doctor because he's talking to Stewart and he's kind of giving him the story. It's kind of rude that he's talking when the priest is talking. There was actually some Episcopal experts who got upset about that. Like, they thought he was the bishop and maybe, he was wearing a rabat, which is a bishop's street wear, but it's not. It's a plain tie. Okay, well, there's the guy that delivered the baby, James McClain. And I thought, man, I'm gonna match him up. No match at all. And McClain was also the one who presided over Bill Vanderbilt's death in 1892. And one of the most prominent pediatricians and surgeons in New York City. But no match. So I'm at the Getty. I had stack reader privilege at the Getty. I was, looking through everything I could find, and I'm looking through the paintings of Raymondo Madrazo, who was a Spanish painter painting in France, and the Prado, actually, in Madrid, has most of his stuff because they're so proud of the fact that he's a Spaniard. So, obscure book, obscure page, way in the back. Painted in 1920. Now, what's really cool about this is, remember what I said about Madrazo? He was Julius Stewart's teacher, roommate, best friend. Wouldn't it be likely, or at least possible, that they would have the same doctor? And this guy, 20 years later, okay, put some hair on him and take the glasses off, but the same ears, the same slope, same nose, same whatever, and nobody made this connection, as far as I know. But that figured into the book. Is I thought that I thought Stewart was telling us by the body language, the doctor gave me this story. So that was something that I actually incorporated into the book. One of the things about Stewart is that he was accurate. Not only he was very accurate with likenesses, as were all the painters of his school. I mean, yes, they would make people look prettier than they were, but he would, as John Singer Sargent often said, he would paint things exactly as they were. It was not okay to make something up. So supposedly you could identify the genus and species of flowers by the way that he painted his flowers. But significant to me is, look out the window. Does that look like Tunis in North Africa? Okay, what was the name again of the place where the Breakers stands in Newport? Ochre Point. What color is ochre?
Yellow.
What color are the trees?
Yellow.
How do trees get their color?
Fall.
And the minerals in the soil. And it's standing on yellow cliffs, right? I think it's circumstantial evidence. Here is a picture from the Redwood Library, which is a private library in Newport. And and one of the nice things about Newport is because all the 1% lived there, there's all these research libraries and scholars and art history buffs and whatever. They're just ready to help you, okay? Now, for a fee, you've got to pay to, microfilm, accession charge and whatever. But, okay, here's a picture of the Pierre Laurel Art House before it burned down. And the morning room would have been there at the back, facing the sea. The sun would come up over the ocean and shine there in the morning. And here's the blueprint that I was able to obtain from one of the books of the period. And here's the floor plan. That will become very important. But that is the logical place for baptism to have occurred in the Vanderbilt's summer house. Pieces are starting to fit, aren't they, Jack? When I saw this, my jaw dropped. I was actually traveling at the time, and 2 months after I'd contacted her, the librarian at the Redwood Library in the photo research department says, I found something you might be interested in. The photo of the morning room. That's the picture of the morning room in the Laurel Art House. There aren't any pictures today because the place burned down. But doesn't that look to you like the location of the fireplace, the location of the window, the fact that there's a tapestry on the wall? I got really excited about this. But it was like the picture of the parish priest. There's a lot of pieces that don't quite fit. So we're going to talk about that. But I was sure I thought this was a smoking gun. Of course it's not, because you can't match detail for detail. But if you rotate that blueprint, you'll see the interior doorways right there. The exterior window right there. Notice something here. It doesn't show the fireplace, but notice something here we'll see later. Notice something here. This is a solid wall. That will become very important. I like to believe this is accurate, because if it's not, then some of my theories go out the window. Speaking of windows, these are very distinctive windows in the painting. They're called fan windows or fan lights. drove me nuts because it seemed to me if I could find a building that had those, if I could find a picture of Laurel Art House from the outside, then that might be further evidence, right? I mean, those are very distinctive windows. Not only are they distinctive as fanlights, but if you drive around town, you'll see fanlight windows all over town. You'll always see a pole in the middle, divided into 4 pieces. This is divided into 5 pieces. So you have a V in the middle. They're a little bit harder to make, okay? But one of the things that's really weird, that's the top of Trinity Church in Newport. That's got a fanlight window with 5 panes. Now, is that the only place where there's fanlight windows with 5 panes? No. And the other thing that's really kind of weird is that house was architected by Peabody and Stearns, well-known New York architect. Vanderbilt had a room addition put on. I wasn't able to find the plans for it or the pictures of it. But even if you were putting a room addition onto this house, you would not put fanlight windows on it. It would be like putting a colonial front on a Mexican house. The two architectural styles don't match. But what does match is the fact that this is in Newport. And you have a painter who couldn't paint anything that he didn't think was authentic. If he didn't see the house, but he knew it was in Newport, what kind of windows might he put there? And there's another reason to put those windows there, is Sunday at 11 a.m. What's going on at Sunday at 11 a.m.? The sun, the position of the sun in the sky over the ocean is coming into the morning room at about a greater than 60-degree angle. That means the sun is probably above the top of the window. Well, again, you've got a painter who wants all his angles and shadows and everything to why did he make the notation on the back? The angle of the sun. Well, in order to get the sun hitting the people in the room right, he had to make the windows taller. Okay, theory, circumstantial evidence. But again, what am I being?
Observant.
Close observer. Yes, I hope that's true too. Okay, I love this. This is another. Okay, what can you tell me about this lady? Close observers.
Prim.
Prim. Good. Observing.
Well,
How about standoffish?
I thought she was cold. Yeah.
Well, she's standing in the back. She's not staying with anybody else. What else do you notice about the way she's dressed?
Black. She's wearing some black.
Black. Very, very conservative. All the other women are in bright satins. Okay, if she's dressed in black, maybe she doesn't have anything fancier. Maybe the fancy stuff that she has is for official functions.
Maybe she lost somebody.
Who might she have come with?
The granny in black.
Good guess. I got a better guess for you. Who might she have come with? The priest. She's his sister or the church secretary. The other thing that is significant here is what's on her head. A hat. What significance would a hat have in ladies of that period? This is pretty obscure. They would wear them to church. Yes, okay. So she had one to wear to church. What's that?
It was obligatory to wear them to church.
Obligatory to wear them to church. That's true. But what else about, you notice some of the women in the room, we're thinking back to the painting, some of the women in the room don't have hats on.
The residents of the house. Yeah.
Got it. Women in hats came from the outside. They were guests. So right away you can pick out the people in the painting that belong in the house and the people who were invited as guests. She was invited as guests. She's standing in the office near the back. Yes, total theory on my part that she came with the priest, but of course if he was elderly, maybe he needed help. But also, the fact that she's kind of standoffish and near the back, she doesn't really feel like she belongs with those people. And there's going to be another very important role that she has to play later. The tapestry, this is another thing, again, I was so excited about this. I mean, how many rooms would have tapestries? And people who looked at the painting experts said, no, that's a tapestry, it's not wallpaper. It's fitted to the room, it's hanging from the crown molding. This is the detail of the tapestry that's in the painting. You look at the tapestry in the room. I finally, through the British Museum, I found a tapestry expert, and she identified the tapestry that's in the Vanderbilt house as the pilgrimage to Mecca after Zuccarelli. It's, people with camels and, they're on a journey and whatever. And of course, it's logical that the painter might exclude human figures from it because it's kind of a distraction. You're painting human figures. You don't want human figures in the background. But guess what? What else do you think doesn't match? What else is there? The foliage, the leaves. And we're talking about a painter who paints things exactly as he sees them. So he knew there was a tapestry in the room, but he didn't know what it looked like. So what did he do? Probably, he picked a famous tapestry that somebody might know that Vanderbilts might have owned. They don't know when they owned it or whatever. But then he would copy the foliage that's this one hangs in the Vatican. That's not necessarily the tapestry he copied. But all I'm saying is that it's logical that somebody that was doing research on a painting that was going to paint after the fact would not just paint generic leaves. He would try to copy something that looked like a real tapestry. That's the only piece of circumstantial evidence there. So, testable hypothesis. Julius Stewart did not witness the baptism. As I was trying to say, there is a point to all this. It's not just because I want to infect you with this painting. All right, let's get back on track. Research. A year before Julius Stewart did the baptism, he did this painting called the Yacht Namuna in Venetian Waters. One of the things that's very interesting about this, and I only learned later, is that there's only one person in this, well, there's actually two people in this picture who are actually on the boat. The guy in the straw hat and the blazer on the right is John Van Dyke, the art critic. And the reason we know a lot about this painting is Van Dyke wrote his memoir, and he wrote about being with Julius Stewart on the boat and painting this picture. Except the boat wasn't moving. The boat was in dry dock for repairs. The owner of the boat, who's the guy in the white suit, who's Julius Stewart's best friend, James Gordon Bennett, was not there. Two of the women were not there. The woman in the chair is probably, according to Van Dyke, a prostitute recruited hastily from shore. Want to be a model? She barely spoke any English. I think they had to speak to her in French. I don't think anybody had any Italian. But basically, it was once they got it across non nudo, everything was fine. It's like, don't take your clothes. Okay, but so she posed 3 times. She posed for this, she posed for this, she posed for this. The thing that's really interesting about this is supposed to be the actress Lily Langtry. And that's the reason people were excited about seeing this painting. Oh, Lily Langtry on a yacht in the Mediterranean, wouldn't that be beautiful? Lily Langtry was nowhere near Europe at this time. So we right away, the year before the baptism was painted, we know that Julius LeBlanc Stewart has got the ability not only to paint something that he never saw, but also to paint it with such accuracy that people recognize Lily Langtry and her friend, Freddie Gebhardt, who's actually, John Van Dyke. And then he put his friend, the owner of the boat had to go in there, but that's a pretty good likeness, but he knew what Gordon Bennett looked like. Okay, so in the painting, things that, I don't really want to belabor this, but things that Julius Stewart got right. There's a bigger list of the things he got right. The religious domination, the priest's robe, the Twombly's as godparents, the sisters Gwen and their attendants, Vanderbilt children, Depew, grandmother Maria in her black dress, the room plan, size, orientation, time of day, tapestry, fireplace and mirror location, but not the detail. The exterior trees and season, it wasn't North Africa. The boys' sailor suits, Newport, but also the boys were wearing sailor suits in Europe at the time as well. The location of the windows, but not the detail. Things he got wrong. The age of the priest, the guy is shown as 30 years younger than he should be. The age of Depew is 20 years older than he should be. The fireplace and mirror, those details don't match. The tapestry doesn't match. The fanlight design does not match what should be in those windows. And most of all, the likenesses of Cornelius, Vanderbilt, Depew, and Alice do not match at all. They match members of his family. So the painter's inventions are these three people. But again, they're the stars of the show, right? So if you were to say at the Chicago World's Fair, where this was exhibited, oh, these are the Vanderbilts. Everybody's gossiping. These are the Vanderbilts. Well, wait a minute. Those aren't the Vanderbilts. That can't be the Vanderbilts. Oh, don't. Forget it. It's not the Vanderbilts. Now, if we have the identities of the real Vanderbilts that are there, the real location, all the things he got right, and then we have the people that he got wrong, that he substituted. If we subtract all those from what we see, we can begin to pick out the details that don't fit. We can begin to pick out as close observers, we can start looking for clues of what other detail can we see. Well, here's two details right away. A little bouquet of violets. A symbol of what?
Love.
Death. Death. Does the mother look healthy or sickly? Sickly. No. The mother, the reclining mother in the lap robe, she couldn't even stand. So and her face is ashen, sick. Okay? On her wrist, 7 gold spangles. Now remember, Alice Vanderbilt died when she was 5. How many children did Alice Vanderbilt have? 7. Little detail, right? 7 wouldn't fit his sister. The girl that was born in 1891 was the firstborn of 3. But Alice Vanderbilt, or his sister, whoever that is, sitting there, is wearing 7 spangles. This bugged the heck out of me. What is that glob of stuff in the middle of the tapestry? It is ugly. There's no reason for it to be there. And therefore, if there's no reason to be there, it must have been invented. What do you think it is? Mud on the wall? Is that what I said? Oh, no. I'm talking about above her head. Yeah. That glob of brown. Looks like a likeness? Well, okay, we make faces out of everything, but when you said mud, you were actually close. That's the terracotta wall showing through. That is a rip in the tapestry. Why would you paint a rip in the tapestry, especially if you hadn't seen it before? But why would you paint a rip? There's no reason for the rip.
Make it authentic.
Well, if he'd seen the room, but I don't think he saw the room. I'm going to tell you why I think he did it. Here's something else. What did I tell you about the blueprint?
The windows.
There's no door in that wall. Now, of course, a door could have been cut in the wall after the blueprint was made. Yes, I know that. But I'm going with the facts that I have and the fact that it's really cool to realize that, okay, since there's no doorway and the windows match, check it out. This is a symbolic tradition in American painting that Stewart would have known about. C.W. Peale, the artist in his museum, look at the the curtain on the door, the way the drape is parted. It's even parted on the same side. And now, granted, no pun intended, the lower painting, Cartoon for Parson Weems' Fable, was painted much later, 1939. Obviously, that didn't have to do with anything. But Wood was familiar with that painter's tradition. It's still a good example. of this painting, this symbol used to make a statement in a painting. What do you think that curtain means?
All is not revealed. All is not revealed.
All is not revealed, and all will be revealed, right? I'll tell you a secret. It's a visual way of saying I'll tell you a secret. Well, what secret might there be in this painting?
The child's parentage.
Okay, good guess. I don't agree. Where's the mother looking right here? Of course, she's looking at the baby, right? Obvious. But look at the angle of her head. Where else might she be looking?
Through the door.
What's she worried about?
There's something.
Behind the curtain.
What's behind the curtain? What's going to happen after I die? I might not live to see my baby grow up. The veil. I mean, you know, in poetry, the veil, the parted veil, the veil between this life and the next. She doesn't know what's behind that door. And then finally, what else might she be looking at? The tear in the tapestry. The family is falling apart. Their whole world in the Gilded Age, the Vanderbilt Railroad Empire, all this vanity, all this arrogance, it didn't last. So, all right, so quickly, finding the narrative in the story. One of the things that I connected with, and that this only happened after I was putting the pieces together, is I began to realize that Julius Stewart actually painted this at a crossroads. After this period of what is called figurative realism or neo-romanticism, pictures really didn't have to tell stories anymore. There was the movies, and pictures also to sell, they weren't so much social gossip pieces. Everything he painted was a social gossip piece. One of the things that happened was photography went off in this direction. The people who were doing realist stuff were taking pictures. They weren't making paintings. But the problem with the photographers was they had to wait for the emotional moment to happen. They couldn't create it. Now they can, CGI, but back then they couldn't. Then the Impressionists said, well, you know, there's this photography, they got reality kind of sewn up. Why don't we paint what's inside the author's mind? And they went in this direction. Well, Julius Stewart and his colleagues were kind of left on the dock. One ship went this way, one ship went the other way, and his genre of painting kind of disappeared. But in postmodern criticism, which is basically what affects museum goers today, is you're not allowed to ask what the story is in the painting. It's all about gestalt. It's got to be about well, you know, are they nice colors? Jackson Pollock, you know, is there a nice color? What's the story in a Jackson Pollock painting? There isn't one. Okay, but we're again looking at this painting back through a filter of we know that there are movies. We know that there has been a whole generation of technology where we see, you know, thousands of images every day. And so if you remember that guy in the white suit in the painting, James Gordon Bennett, this was Julius Stewart's best friend. Not only was he his best friend, but he was the owner of the Paris Herald newspaper. He was the Rupert Murdoch of his day. He was also an absolute scoundrel and a rake. He was everything. He was as sinful and as proud of it as Cornelius Vanderbilt was of being self-righteous. And as it turns out, nobody resented Cornelius Vanderbilt more than this guy, because he had been shamed out of Newport society to the point where he really had to take up residence in Europe. He started the yacht club in Newport, but he couldn't set foot back there again because the righteous people, the Vanderbilts, is like, well, you know him, he's the one who jilted, you know, that one, you know, whatever. And in fact, he didn't reform himself after he went to Europe. This woman wrote a whole novel about how she'd been raped by him after he proposed to her, took a train ride with him, and she had told him she wouldn't consummate their marriage until it was over, but he bribed not only the bodyguard but also her mother not to take the trip, so there wouldn't be a chaperone. And when he had his boat, the boat picture we saw, the Yacht Namuna, he would dock the yacht in Venice, and he would invite 5 lovely single ladies to tea. And they would go, "Oh, the publisher of the New York Herald invited me to his boat to tea." And he'd make sure it was a lavish cream tea on the boat, whatever, but while they were having their tea, he'd go to the captain and he'd instruct the captain to weigh anchor and set sail. And then he would inform the ladies politely later that they'll be returning to port in 4 days. And that night he would go from door to door with a little bottle of champagne and some box of chocolates. He got lucky more than once.
5 times.
Not a nice man. Not somebody you would introduce your mother to. This theme of mother-daughter is that it has to be at the center of the painting. The mother is looking at the daughter, the infant daughter, with both envy and jealousy. Its life is looking at birth. Death is looking at life. And she's not only loving her daughter desperately and thinking that but also thinking that she might not live to see her daughter grow up, but there's also the feeling of she resents all these people that are going to live and she's not. Death resents life. It's going to be over for her. I mean, if she's really terminal, if she's really as sick as she looks. And then we have the subplot, the historical subplot, which carries the theme, which is vanity, arrogance. Cornelius Vanderbilt actually ended up having a running feud with his son, Neely. After Bill died, he wanted Neely to step up to be the master of the estate. And Neely was a introverted engineer type. All he wanted to do was play his banjo and do his experiments, and he didn't want to be the head of anything. And then he turned around and married a woman that the family disapproved of, and Cornelius got so upset yelling at him about it that he keeled over from a stroke and died. Exactly. And there's an undercurrent here, J.P. Morgan, and here's the smoking gun. Here is the smoking gun. Because one of my correspondents was the head of the Episcopal Diocese. He was the historian for the Episcopal Diocese of New York. And he said, well, you know, in the time that you're talking about, between 1889 and 1892, the church changed its policy on baptism. In 1889, it was okay to have a baptism in a private home. In 1892, it wasn't. Now, in 1886, when Gladyss was born, it was kosher, it was okay, fine. Even the bishop had volunteered to do it. But if the painting's being shown at the Chicago World's Fair, and Cornelius Vanderbilt is setting himself up to be the whitest Episcopal in the world, and 100,000 people are going to see it, do you think he wanted anybody to know that he had defied the church doctrine, which was about to be changed? Who was the head of the doctrine committee? This is the cover sheet of the new liturgy. J.P. Morgan. Oh. J.P. Morgan, Cornelius Vanderbilt's bitter rival. If 10 people read you, 100 people read you, somebody 100 years after you're dead, their behavior may be changed by what you do.